Hello everyone. Today we are discussing the first 3 chapters of Emergency Sex and Other Desperate Measures by Kenneth Cain, Heidi Postlewait, and Andrew Thomson. Our 3 characters, Ken, Heidi, and Andrew, all have lots of different backgrounds and motivations for why they're doing what they're doing. But all of these whys and hows overlap in really interesting ways. For example, all 3 of them seem to agree that wealthier countries, such as our own, suffer from artifice and superficiality. Ken, the youngest of the 3, can't bring himself to go into corporate tax law like his classmates to get rich. It's too boring and pointless to him, just a mere shelter for all that mirthless self-confidence. He doesn't seem to think much of his well-to-do Harvard Law peers, so he thinks up a thesis project that will take him to South Africa. And Andrew, flashing back to his med school days, remembers being worried about final exams and finding money to pay off my new motorcycle before he makes a connection with his Cambodian classmate, who eventually inspires him to become a Red Cross doctor in Cambodia. And Heidi, struggling with her divorce, can't deal with her very normal life. All the questions can't be answered already, she says. There's got to be something more. Maybe it's time to get pregnant, buy a house, adopt a dog. All of those options are far more boring than her ultimate decision to work abroad for the UN. She adds, ashamed, I find myself envying the Iraqis and the Israelis. There seems nothing false about war. Loyalties are strong. The enemy is known. There are none of the subtleties and nuances of ordinary life. You're at the core of every feeling. Nothing else matters but to stay alive. And that's how I want to feel. Let's pick that quote apart. Is life in America with our first world problems superficial? I mean, sure, to some extent. We act a certain way around our bosses or our professors. We buy expensive sneakers and pay to get our nails done. Sure, we can be fake in some ways. But to say that you'd rather live in a war zone than have to navigate social niceties and brush your hair, that's something only a very privileged person from one of these wealthier countries can say. I'm sure any war refugee would love to switch places with her. And yet, there's this understanding from all of the characters that in order to experience real life, you need to head where people are most vulnerable, where the most people are dying, to the border of life and death. Are we too comfortable in the US? So comfortable that our lives have lost any deep or profound meaning? Does privilege or lack of struggle deprive us of something? Maybe appreciation for life, or some sort of wisdom about how we should live. Our protagonists' search for meaning in their lives takes them to places where they are far more likely to lose their lives. Is this heroic? Or is it the adventure-seeking stupidity of bored, privileged first-worlders? Now, I can't be too hard on her. She does say that she is ashamed, so she likely already knows that criticism that I just made about her. And despite living in a privileged country, she is living below the poverty line, all because she works as a social worker. Doing good deeds does not pay well in this country. And what's more, death does seem to bring the life out in people. Consider Ken's trip to Israel. He sees a missile land for the first time ever. He could die tonight. He's excited, nervous, thrilled, scared, and he doesn't know what to do with himself. He compares it to losing his virginity, all of that trepidation and awkwardness. And I think that's an interesting metaphor to use. Sexual knowledge is something that changes you, and you can never forget. You can forget how to solve quadratic equations, you can forget the elements of the periodic table and the capital of Canada, but you'll never forget where babies come from. And you'll never forget, I presume, what it's like to be in a war zone. This kind of knowledge, the knowledge that deals directly with life and death, it stays with you. After that experience, he goes back to Harvard, and all of his hallmates are talking about the bomb like they know it all. The fact that I was just there offers no barrier to their compulsion to display certainty and omniscience. He can't sit on the sidelines and just watch the global conflicts from the safety of New England anymore, like these guys. I now know I'll never be a lawyer, he says. He wants to join the game. Ken never takes the bar exam, and he's trying to figure out what to do with himself and his degree when he learns about a job in Cambodia. Now, since we skipped this chapter, I'm just going to give a really quick summary. The United Nations is trying to set up an election there, and they need people with law degrees, like Ken. When he gets there, he finds a room in a pretty luxurious house with other young, hip internationals. Another boarder at the house is Heidi, who dislikes Ken and his stories about Harvard, but they're the only two Americans in the house, and they eventually warm up to each other. Heidi does secretarial work in preparing for the election, and she runs the voting booths on the day of. Ken's main job is educating Cambodians about the elections. Democracy 101, how to register, how to vote, and explaining the ballots are secret so no one will know who you voted for. The Red Cross is about to send Andrew to Bosnia, but the UN offers him a job. The UN just got access to the Cambodian jails, and they want Andrew to bring the prisoners back to health for election day. This is how Ken and Andrew meet, and the younger Ken is in awe of Andrew's confidence and productivity in his humanitarian work. Heidi is not as enamored, but she gets along with the guys pretty well, and the three of them become close. Despite doubts, the election goes off without a hitch. The coming chapters have much more violence in them, but in the Cambodian chapter, there is far less violence. But the violence that does happen happens to the Cambodians, not really to any of the UN workers. After the election, the UN sends Andrew to Haiti and Heidi and Ken to Somalia. After all of this, stories about Gawain going to fulfill some pointless test with a jolly green giant seems really dumb in comparison. But in most of our other stories, things get resolved. The day isn't always saved, perhaps, but a lesson is learned, or peace with a situation is made. No one here is saving the world. The world just can't be saved. When Andrew amputates a landmine victim's leg in Cambodia, he says, "I've saved his life, but ruined his future." How will he make a living without two strong legs to help him? Wheelchair accessibility, if he can afford one, probably isn't a high priority over there right now. But this is the extent of Andrew's abilities. In Somalia, Ken has a similar thought. This isn't quite the kind of logic I learned in law school, and there are no provisions in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights to negotiate with a murderous militia in control of a prison. I have trouble wrapping my mind around how cheap death is here. It's a commodity to negotiate and trade. 3 dead prisoners for a ton of rice. The release of one girl who's been gang raped for months in exchange for a shipment of penicillin. The joyous look on a child's face when she realizes she's free from a Somali prison seems momentarily to justify our work, but the next day they pick up 3 more girls. There's no way for us to win. The more effective we are, the more damage we do. How exhausting to fight a battle you know you will never win. Never mind trying to save the world, they're just trying to reduce harm by whatever tiny degree they can. And let's not forget, these people are not experts. They're just kind of making it up as they go along for lack of time or lack of resources because everything's an emergency and a new situation is always happening. I mean, Andrew is a doctor and Heidi is a social worker and Ken is not quite a lawyer. But they're not diplomats or soldiers. They haven't been trained for politics or war. They are civilians who chose to work in a war zone. I mean, I want to call them heroes, but Do they have any idea what they're doing? What I appreciate about this memoir is that nothing is sacred in this book. They're trying their best to do good, but they fail and they fuck up, and they don't try to hide the dirt and shame and the uneasy feelings they have about it. Do I think these people are heroes? I mean, absolutely none of them meet my ideal for what a hero is. But I do think there should be more people doing what they're trying to do. We'll finish out Chapter 3, Condition Charlie, for next time. I know I said this last time, but just a reminder, there are graphic descriptions of the violence that's happening, and it gets worse as we go along, so just mentally prepare yourself for that. For your original posts, this is our first day with a new text, so I just want to hear your questions. Post your discussion questions to the boards for your attendance, and responses to those posts can earn you up to 3 participation points today. You might have noticed that I posted the instructions for the final essay and the proposal. The proposal is the exact same as last time. 3 pages, 4 paragraphs, and a working thesis statement. Be sure to underline it. That's due May 1st, so about a week from now. The final essay is very similar to the midterm essay. It was going to be for 24 points, but since we aren't going to be able to meet in person for me to help you with drafts, I've reduced it to 20 points, just like the midterm. It will be 5 to 6 pages long, comparing 2 texts from our second unit, so that includes Harakiri, Battle of Algiers, Batman, Strong Female Protagonist, and Emergency Sex. You get to come up with the topic this time, so long as it deals with heroes. Now, you've done a lot of work on this paper already. This is why we've been doing discussion board posts. You've already been thinking through possible paper topics on the boards, so feel free to borrow ideas from there. Obviously, don't just straight up copy and paste other people's posts, but you can use those ideas as the starting point for your own unique, debatable thesis. That essay will be due the Friday of finals week, May 8th at noon. You can find the full instructions under the Assignments tab on Canvas. Please read those instructions fully and thoroughly, and as always, let me know if you have any questions. Lastly, please read the latest course announcement in full. Since internet access can be spotty for some of us, I'm going to let you all make up any discussion board posts and any journal entries that you would like to up until the end of the day on Monday of finals week, May 4th. This includes original posts for attendance, responses for participation points, and even journal entries from before spring break. Now, the limit of 3 responses per day still applies, but you can go back to any date that you want and write more posts or responses. That said, please don't procrastinate on your remaining discussion board posts and just leave the rest of them until May 4th. I really encourage you to continue posting on our official class days, both so that your classmates have someone to talk to on the boards on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and also so that you aren't left with a whole bunch of work to do at the last minute. And that's the end of our lecture. Only 1 week left.